if you truly wish to be.
I was just watching a documentary on Gene Wilder this week. Thank you so much, Sharon and Lee and Jeremy. Can we give them just a little bit more love? So we're starting our book study today, and the book is The World Could Be Otherwise by Norman Fischer. It's available for sale in the bookstore. And actually, I've been in touch with Norman Fischer's people, and I'm trying to see if maybe he can come be one of the speakers on one of these months. Working on it. We'll see if he can make it. I'm hearing a hum. It's the bass. Lee, can you turn your bass monitor off, or whatever you do? That's a nice hum, though. That's like an ohm, isn't it? It's like, It's like, right into your bones. Shake all that stuff loose. So the subtitle of this book is Imagination and the Bodhisattva Path. And as I started to read this book, what I was really struck by is on the back cover, there's just like a little blurb, and it really hit me. It's, in frightening times, we wish the world could be otherwise. With a touch of imagination, it can be. And it really landed for me right now. I don't know, does anyone else with me in this idea of frightening times? And And in those moments, it really is about practice, right? It's about regrounding ourselves. Whatever's going on in our life that's trying to throw us off, whatever is happening that makes us feel overwhelmed, or it's too much, or it's an opportunity to quiet and to still, to take a pause, to take a breath. And so for the first week of this, we're looking at 2 chapters, but then after that, we're just looking at 1, right? And the 2 chapters that we're going to be looking at this week are imagination and one of the 6 perfections, which is part of the Bodhisattva path, which is generosity. And imagination for Fischer is, I feel like I want to call him Norman. I've never met him, I want to call him Norman. Imagination is the larger framework that he's inviting us to hold everything in. And there's another reason why I really resonated with that, because imagination is one of our 12 powers. Imagination is one of the ways that we understand that we can access the divinity that we are. And he says imagination is a gateway to possibility, the first step toward living a life grounded in compassion and wisdom. And what I also appreciated about this book is that he's very clear that imagination on its own is not enough. Imagination on its own is a little like thoughts and prayers. Imagination is the first step. It is the way we begin something. And he really makes a point to say that imagination is not something that's frivolous. It's actually how we can create change, both internally and externally in the world. So Unity's understanding of imagination is we understand it to be the ability to image, picture, conceptualize, envision, and dream. And so the power of conception, right, to conceive new ideas. It is the power of vision to dream of what does not yet exist. And it is the power of embodiment, living as if. We can feel how this is a fertile space to begin anything from, particularly the power of embodiment. And I think this is the one that I know I struggle with, and I know that most of us struggle with. the actual embodiment in time, in space. We may have all these fabulous ideas. We have these fabulous, everybody in here have fabulous visions for their life? It's the embodiment of them that is actually going to make them real. So imagination is the starting point. The 6 perfections, and we're going to talk about that word because anybody else get triggered by that? The 6 perfections provide a structure, giving us concrete practices to transform our aspirations into lived reality. Anybody in here want the lived reality of what we're imagining? I know I do. So his premise, it so aligns with unity that it's another reason why it really resonated with me. He says, we're only human, but we're also more. Sound like when I say we are a divine human? He says we each have to take ourselves less seriously as the person we think we are, and more seriously as the bodhisattva we also surely are. So it's this invitation to let go of some of the ideas that we have about who we think we are so that we can show up in that Christ nature. You can pretty much, from his perspective and how he talks about all of this, we can intersperse Christ, Buddha consciousness here, because in the Mahayana Buddhism tradition, they envision Buddha as an eternal cosmic principle. Sound similar to the Christ consciousness? It's the imaginary embodiment of love. And each person at the core is a Buddha in potential. So the way we understand the Christ is not a person, but it is a state of consciousness. That is exactly what he is proposing here about the understanding of Buddha. That it may have been manifested and demonstrated through Siddhartha, but it is not exclusive. That there are Buddhas everywhere, and there are bodhisattvas, Buddhas in training, as he would call it, everywhere. And he says that's what we all are. We're all Buddhas in training. And we all are bodhisattvas, and we're called to practice compassion and to be devoted to the benefit of others. I just need us to take a moment there. Because I think in our unity teaching, and this is why I also wanted to bring this book in, I think sometimes we can get very focused on our internal experience, and we do not pay as much attention to how what we are called to be is a benefit to the world. We think about our own needs, our own desires, our own wants, our own vision for our life. And there's nothing wrong with that. So if that's where you are, woohoo, right? Because that's about that manifestor stage of consciousness. That's about understanding that we're not victims. That's about understanding that we are empowered to actually create something for ourselves. And we are being called to something more than that. We're being called into this awareness that compassion isn't only me benefiting you, it's us together, right? And I love this line. He says, in the expansive, ever-connectedly ineffable space of imaginative reality. Whew. You try to talk about the things that we really can't put language to, and you end up with a sentence like that. But I love this, connectedly ineffable space of imaginative reality. How often do we forget that reality, as we understand it, is imaginative? How often do we think it is, rather than understanding that it is imaginative? It's fluid and flexible and malleable. He goes on to say, I am not just me. You are not just you. We are we. It's life taking care of life, and it's the most natural thing possible. And I think that in our teaching, that this piece is something we need to nurture more fully. This understanding that life is a life, period. And there is no me, there is no you. There is the we. There is the wholeness. There is the allness. So the framework that he's inviting us to explore for the next 6 weeks are the 6 perfections. And the word, the actual word that's been translated into perfections is paramitas. And the 6 perfections are generosity, ethical conduct, patience, joyful effort, meditation, and then understanding and wisdom. All right, so these are the 6 perfections, the paramitas. And how he's inviting us to hold these is that the 6 perfections are there to support us, our ability to reimagine and recreate a world that isn't about brokenness, that isn't about what isn't working, to support our capacity to create and imagine a world that is compassion and wisdom and interconnectedness. These perfections offer us a way to focus ourselves. And what I love about this is the perfections are about us practicing something. They're about us being able to practice this so that we, me, we, you, it's all the same, but me, right here, I get to learn how to be more in harmony with the world. I am the one who is practicing it. I'm not expecting something to come and wave its magic wand and just make all the AK-47s disappear. Right? I am the one who is building some capacity within myself. Myrtle Fillmore says, the challenge is that I don't live in a cave. I am connected. What happens for me happens for all life. And it's our practice that makes our imaginings real. It's our practice that brings them into that lived reality, which is always imaginative. Right? It's not fixed. If you walk away from nothing during this talk except that, I want you to understand that our seeming reality is not fixed. It is imaginative. So, I don't know about you, but I heard and read the word perfection, and immediately I was like, oh God, another thing I have to do, master, perfect. So he says very clearly, the 6 perfections are impossible, right? So we get to breathe into that. They're impossible. Paramita, the word means gone to the other side. And he's inviting us to hold this idea of perfection as to the end of impossible and beyond. All the way on the other side of whatever limitations we have imposed upon ourselves and our understanding of the world. And he says, no one can practice them, but we practice them anyway. We make the impossible possible. Can you feel the godness there, right? It's a divine paradox. That these are ideals. So in unity speak, we would call them divine ideas. Divine ideas that we are never in time and space going to live into fully. Just let that go, right? Whatever is getting triggered about what you need to accomplish or how good you have to be, or right? Let it go. The whole point of this is that these perfections are expansive, imaginative practices that inspire us to action. And we're never, ever going to complete them. It's a lifetime's work, and it's never going to be done. Phew. So we don't have to worry about supposedly being perfect about any of this. It's the path and the practice. That's the goal. It's not about the destination. Can you feel how this will automatically support us being in present moment awareness? There's always a challenge with our imagination and the vision, right? It's so important that we have imagination, that we have a vision, that we have something pulling us forward. But if all of our focus is out there in the future, then guess what? Nothing is happening here. Nothing is actually happening here. So that vision is going to stay out there in the future. These 6 perfections are just a way to focus our practice so that we can discover a capacity that we have that maybe we never knew we had, that invites us to grow past our ego self into the truth of who we are, the bodhisattva that we all are. And so the first perfection is the perfection of generosity. And he says, generosity is the natural expression of the awakened heart. When we offer not only our material resources, but also our time, energy, and love. Now, I did a whole talk on a lot of this a couple of weeks ago, so if you want to dive into it a little bit more, you can. But it's the idea that we give ourselves fully to life, which means we're giving ourselves fully to others. Because life is all of us. And so we're being invited to step out of our small concerns. We're being invited to actually be awakened heart to what's actually happening. And I'm not saying it's easy. I sat there watching the news this week, and my heart was broken open again and again and again and again. And every time it broke open, I got to invite myself to a deeper understanding of how do we, it's all the same. How do we shift this? Because it is in our capacity to shift this. But we cannot keep doing what we have continued to do. Because guess what? The vision is always out there. It's inviting us to something right here, right now, not in the future. And the only way we can begin to master this, if we even master it at all, because that's not the point, is that we have to start practicing. So there is this idea, which I talked about that we don't give to get, right? That when we give, there needs to be a freedom to how we're giving, that there is no expectation of a return. Because scripturally, we know that what we give comes back to us multiplied. Not because we expect it, but because it is spiritual law. It's rooted in the abundance that is all life. And yet, so many of us come from a place of lack and not enoughness. Oh, I can't give here because that means I won't have enough here. Or we give and we expect this direct reciprocity. It doesn't work that way, folks. It doesn't. I've done things deeply generous. Chris was reminding me when I first moved to LA, and this is when I was unemployed. I could barely pay my own rent. I was like, it was terrifying. And I met this young woman who had no place to live. And so I invited her into my home. And she lived with me, rent-free, for almost a year, a little over a year. I didn't expect anything back from her. I wasn't doing it because I wanted something back from her. I was doing it because I was as close to that edge as she was already on the other side of that edge. And I trusted the abundance. And I knew that there was going to be enough space, there was going to be enough room, there was going to be enough. So at the end of each chapter in the book, he gives very, very concrete practices for each of these perfections, practices to put into this whole week. I want to invite you into these practices. If you don't have a chance to read the chapter itself, go to the end of the chapter and just take a look at the practices so that you can start them rather than starting them at the end of the week. That makes sense to everyone, right? So one of the practices that he talks about is mindful giving. And the intention is to just every day give something to someone. Every day. It could be a kind word, it could be a smile, it could be your time, it could be a material gift. One of the things he suggests in there that his teacher suggested to him is that anytime you go into a bathroom, that you wipe down all the counters. Right? But think about that. As you're wiping down the counters, not because they're dirty, not because you're judging, but because I want to create a space that's clean and safe for the next person, and I have no idea who that person is. The goal in this practice is to just be aware of what comes up for you in the act of giving. What are the feelings that get triggered? Do you feel yourself tensing? Do you feel yourself resisting? It's okay. Just notice what's happening because those things are guiding you. And that will help you to begin to understand what you might need to unhook yourself from around abundance and prosperity and all those good things. You might notice that you're so easy for you to give of your time, but that when it comes to giving of your money, you start to have palpitations, right? There is no difference between time and money. They are all both exchanges of energy, that's all. In your mind, there is a difference. In your belief system, there is a difference. But what if you could let that go? What if you could actually rest in the reciprocity? And that reciprocity isn't going to come back to you in a way I never expected, and I don't expect that the good of my generosity of letting that young woman stay with me until she got herself settled was going to come back to me in equal measure, that she was going to have to put me up for a year, right? Or that even anybody was going to have to put me up. It doesn't exist it's not like and like. It's that I put that energy out into the world and then generosity comes back to me. I don't know how, but I know that generosity is because it's that giving and receiving. Does this make sense? Because the next practice is, we love technology, don't we? The next practice is to release the attachment to the outcome of your generosity, right? So when you give, whether it's time or money or attention, can you let go of that need, that desire to be acknowledged, to be seen as being generous? I think they tried to reboot it, so this will work. So just noticing where you're attached to what the result is supposed to be, and then practice releasing it. And this, I give you this affirmation: I give freely, trusting in the abundance that is my life right now. Let's say that together. I give freely, trusting in the abundance that is my life right now. Right? We're trying to unhook ourselves from a narrative. Because right now, I know that there's a whole lot of us in here that are struggling with the idea that there's not enough votes, or there's not enough people who agree, or there's not. That's all lack consciousness. Everyone breathe into that with me. Lack consciousness. So what is it that we are going to engage in? If we believe in the limitless potential, there are so many unregistered voters out there, people. There is a pool of people that are waiting to be inspired, that are waiting to be invited. There is no lack, except in the constructs that we're creating in our imagination. And then the last one that I'm pointing out, now in the book there's lots, he really does give you lots and lots of options. But can you practice generosity towards yourself? This, I think, is probably the most important one. Because do you take time to reflect on the things that you've done well? Or do you just focus on the things you need to do better? Do you take time to treat yourself with the same kindness that you might offer to a friend? Or I like to say, a child? Sometimes we judge our friends, right? Let's be honest, right? Why can't she get her act together? We don't do that with children, right? We understand intuitively that children are growing and evolving. Well, guess what? So are we, right? So are we. So that same spaciousness, where the invitation is, can you be generous with yourself? And one of the things that he talks about giving is your fearlessness. Can you give your fearlessness? Now, in Unity, we talk about fear as being false evidence appearing real. So when we talk about fearless, we talk about not getting caught up in that false evidence that looks so real, right? Can you generously share that? The prayer chaplains do that all the time. That's their mission, is to share their fearlessness, that the false evidence isn't real, because guess what? Reality is imaginative. So can you be, because when we're more kind and we're more generous to ourselves, when we acknowledge the places where we're fearless, when we acknowledge the places where we know that we know, that it enables us to extend our generosity more freely, because we're rooted in our own self-worth. We're rooted in compassion. And I say this all the time, we cannot give what we do not have. We cannot give what we do not have. So this is a space where we want to cultivate our self-worth, cultivate the things that we do well, fully aware that there are things we don't do well. Do we need to place, most of us probably place about 90% of our focus on the things we don't do well, and we give ourselves 10% to the things that we did. We assume that the things we did is just normal. Oh, that's just normal. That's not special. That's just normal. So frustrating when we all do this. We all do this. Anything that we accomplish is not normal, because at any point we could freeze and not do it. So when we do it, we need to pat ourselves on the back. And that's not hubris. I'm not talking about pridefulness. I'm talking about deep humility, right? A deep, deep humility a willingness to acknowledge that you are more than just your humanness. And that arises from humbleness, not from pride. We are all bodhisattvas practicing compassion and the vow to be of benefit to others, the dedication to be of benefit to others, the devotion to be of benefit to others. And I know everyone in here is doing it. I know you do it with your families. I know you do it with your circle of friends. I'm inviting you to blow that open, to just open yourself up to a larger circle of awareness. And so the question that I'm going to be inviting you into through this whole 6 weeks is, what is the bodhisattva you envision yourself to be? Because your bodhisattvaness, your Buddha-ness in training, is not going to look like anybody else's. It's going to look like yours. What does that look like? And the way we discover this is by doing something differently, right? Stepping beyond what we already know and engaging with that leading edge. We would call this in Unity the leading edge of consciousness. I'm going to leave you with a Myrtle quote, which I loved. It's not always best for a person to continue doing that which they like to do or have even been trained to do. We need to develop all of our faculties and powers to increase what the world needs most. Right? Myrtle. Jeez. Right? I remember when I was struggling with letting go of the dream of acting, my imagination, I had like vision boards with myself accepting Tonys and, I had to let go of what that imaginative reality was and develop different faculties and powers. And it's great on the other side of it. It was hellacious in the middle of it, but it's so much more on the other side of it. Now, the only reason why it was so challenging was because I was fighting it every step of the way. I was fighting it. I was fighting the inner call within myself to be devoted in a different way. I wasn't listening because I was so attached to what I thought my life should be that I was missing out on what was right in front of me. Now, the thing is, the divinity that I am did not let me wiggle off of that hook. It just kept me going to Agape. It kept me going to the classes. It kept me doing the work until eventually I let go. And I know I say this, but let go or get dragged, people, right? I was dragged for a long time until I was like, how about if I just let go? Oh, look how nice it is if I just let go. Imagination, imaginative reality. I was fixing my reality. Can you feel that? I was fixing my reality and I was creating my own suffering. But when we allow ourselves to step into like the plasticity of reality and we dance with that, that is when we actually become something that is truly creating change in the world. So let's take this into our time of meditation. Because there's a lot in this book, and I know that it's pushing me to sort of step out of my own little bubble. And so whatever might have gotten stirred up for you, whatever resonated, just breathing into that spaciousness that is truly who we actually are. Our Buddha, Christ nature. available to us in all of its fullness and all of its magnificence. Resting in this spaciousness that is all love, all compassion, that is innate wisdom. And let go. Let go of whatever it is that you are holding on to so tightly. Allow your heart to open generosity to yourself, to the world. Allow yourself to dance and be present with this imaginative reality. And let's just rest here as we just welcome our bodhisattva-ness to arise in our understanding. What is the bodhisattva that we are here to be? So let's just take a few minutes in the silence to just be. How good it is to be still and just to allow ourselves to unattach, allowing our hearts to open even more, welcoming this opportunity to focus our spiritual practice through this lens of the Bodhisattva path, knowing that these goals are quote unquote impossible, and yet knowing that we are being called to make the impossible possible, that it is our practice that changes the world, because our practice is changing us. And so as we step into this process, we just do so with grace, a generosity of spirit for ourselves, for each other. And just knowing that the path, the journey is all. Welcoming that. How grateful I am to know that when we come together and say yes, that the way is made. That transformation is possible in this imaginative reality. And so it is. Amen. Ashe.